Hi, folks. This is your 2023 labor law update. We're talking about things that are specific to California, although I do include some kind of federal and other state information in here. We're real specific to California over here. My name's Candace Elliott. I'm the founder of Fortress and Flourish, which is an HR and leadership strategy firm. My background is in human resources, and I just want to say that I am not an attorney and none of this is legal advice. This is just meant to be educational information for you. If you're looking for legal guidance on anything, I have a few different resources, folks that I work with who I trust and I think are amazing attorneys, especially in the employment law space. So if you want a connection like that, just reach out and let me know. Okay, so first thing is that minimum wage, it has gone up to $15.50, so $15.50 statewide in California. Some cities have minimum wage rates that are higher than this, some cities and counties. So check your city, check your county to see if there's anything that is different about where you might live. So this is true for all employers of any size. So there were different minimum wage rates for employers with less than 25 employees and those with more for a while, but now everybody is the same across the board for this year, 2023. Some other things to think about that are related to wages are the living wage where you live. So the living wage where I live is currently $27.44 an hour for a single person with no kids. The disparity between the minimum wage and the living wage is significant in my county. And it means that when we are paying people in rates between minimum wage and the living wage, we are not giving them enough money and be able to afford to live here. So the limit for public assistance for a single person, no kids, is almost $19,000 a year. So if you make less than that amount, then you can qualify for things like Section 8, which helps with housing, Medi-Cal, which is medical insurance, food, CalFresh food stamps, and other things like that. Some people who make minimum wage make around this amount and then are able to have public assistance, which ends up bringing them to a similar amount as the living wage through the public benefits that are made available to them. But where we have this crunch, where people go into lots of credit card debt, where people live in unsafe conditions, either where there's, violence or housing that's unsafe or housing that is, too crowded, and, people kind of continue to stay in abusive relationships and things like this, is when we are not paying people enough to be able to afford where they live. It's already difficult enough to live in my county of Santa Cruz on $28 an hour. Making under that, there are compromises that have to be made around dignity and health and all of these things that make it exceptionally unfair, I think, for people to make less than that amount. And so I recognize that there are market pressures. There are real profitability challenges and things that are related to why companies pay people less than the living wage. But I just want to put it out there as a goal to pay every single person in your organization at least the living wage. And I'm going to have another update that comes out probably in April when the new living wage numbers come in, because they're going to change around that time. Another number to think about is your area's median income. So where I live in Santa Cruz, the area median income for a single household is $96,000. I mean, you can get into looking at other numbers, like what is the median cost of a house that's being sold and things like that. But I think these are kind of basic, not basic, but these are essential numbers to, as an employer, know what they are, wrap your head around them, and really relate how you're paying to these greater systems that we're all participating in. The living wage is different for every county in the whole country. I mean, it's different based on where you live throughout the world. But MIT does a study that comes out every year where you can look up what your living wage is. So I recommend checking that out. And then area median income is a demographic study that is done county by county also. And so you can look up your area's median income. It's something that's used by the government in order to determine qualification for different kinds of programs. So it's available across the board in all counties in the United States. I'm not sure about other countries and this type of metric, and guessing that there's something similar that's available. If you have any information on that, I would love to know about it. Okay, next big thing is wage transparency. So in California, for employers with 15 or more employees, a new requirement is that salary ranges need to be posted on all job postings. So if you have 15 or more employees, regardless of if they're part-time or full-time, the salary range for each job has to be on the job ad when it goes out. So if you don't already have an idea of what your salary ranges are, that's a good thing to look into this year, to be able to decide, what are the ranges that I'm going to pay for this job? How does this job relate to the other jobs in my organization? Employees now have the right to request the pay scale for their current position. So I think up to this point, there has been a lot of determining how a position will be paid relative to what you have to do in order to hire someone in order to fill the job. And there has been a lot of secrecy around pay, and we don't talk about who gets paid what, or how this person is paid relative to another person. And it's just that we're moving into a new world that is different than that. And so salary ranges for all job postings, it's something that is very, you see this in government institutions all the time. I mean, there are pay classifications, there are agreements around what is happening with pay. It's all transparent and above the board. And that's the direction that this is heading. For companies that have 100 or more employees, they're going to be required to submit pay data and wage history to the state. And so there'll be checking around the equity for how people are being paid relative to one another and in different jobs. So why is this happening right now? One thing is that employees want it. During the pandemic, the Great Recession, Pew Research did a study about everyone who resigned from their positions, and pay was one of the main reasons why people would leave, why they would leave a job that they had, why they would try to find another job. And so coming out of, that sort of environment, ways to increase retention, to have less discrimination, and to build trust. Like wage transparency is one of the key components to those three things, to keeping people around, to making sure people are paid fairly relative to one another, and building trust. So this shift is happening in California, and it's also happening in New York and Washington State as well. And so we're not the only ones that are making this shift at this time. Kind of as you look at what happens in employment law in California, you see how employment law will go in other states in the United States. California tends to go first or on the front line for a lot of these employee protecting laws and practices, and then other states will follow. Another shift here is being explicit about bereavement leave. California has a ton of leave law requirements. So now there is this one of bereavement leave, which is allowing your employees to take up to 5 days of unpaid leave for the death of a close family member. It's pretty simple implementation wise in that way. You can give people paid time off for this if you want. That can be a part of your leave policy, but the requirement is just to have unpaid time off. Just to talk about some of those other California leaves that are required. So we have a California medical leave, pregnancy disability leave. There's organ and bone marrow donor leave. There are a variety of different kinds of military service leave, and also like Civil Air Patrol leave and things like this. There's school visitation leave. So I just recommend, doing a little bit of a review of all the different kinds of leaves that there are, so that if something comes up, like a light bulb goes off in your head and you're like, oh, wait, okay, I need to do that one. Another piece of the pie this year is that when there is a state of emergency, and this is a natural state of emergency, like a fire, like the floods that are happening right now, it is not a pandemic related emergency. Employers may not retaliate or discipline an employee who either refuses to report to work or stay at work because they have a reasonable belief that the work area is unsafe. So if there is a state of emergency, such as an earthquake, a fire, a flood, any of these things, and you have an employee who says, I don't feel safe being able to, in coming to work or in staying at work because of this state of emergency, think about this requirement that's coming through at this time. So what's happening outside of California? The federal minimum wage is still at $7.25. I just don't even know what to say about that. Minimum wage is an interesting economic tool because when minimum wage increases, inflation also increases. And it seems like what has happened is that most of the states have taken on the burden and responsibility of raising minimum wage relative to their own sort of economic realities. And in that, the federal minimum wage hasn't changed at all. And if you want to go back in history to when minimum wage was originally created, the intent of minimum wage was to be able to make sure that people who were working were paid enough across the country in order to be able to afford to live where they were living, so that they did not fall into poverty and not need to access government assistance. So in a situation where we have states where 725 isn't going to even buy you a sandwich, um, we're seeing kind of the disparity between what is happening in some states versus other states with this minimum wage situation. Colorado started their family leave policy this year. There are now 13 states that have family leave. Some of them provide leave for the mother. Some provide leave for people who are giving birth or adopting or fostering children. Some places give leave for both the birthing parent and their partner, or just the mother and the father. So there's kind of a wide variety of ways that these leaves are implemented in all these different states, but there are 13 states that are at least giving time off for a birthing woman to be able to have their baby and be supported during those first, it's usually 3 months after the baby is born. Illinois has expanded their definition of what protected time off is, and basically like what qualifies as job protected leave. Alaska has some interesting developments around veterans' preference for jobs, and Alabama is in the zone of protecting people's ability to have weapons at work. So we've got a wide spectrum of kinds of laws that are happening in all these different states and at the federal level. So every year I recommend doing an annual check-in about what's happening with your business as it relates to HR things, labor law things. One thing to look into is time tracking. So if you have exempt employees, just making sure that you're not getting into any kinds of sticky issues about whether they are exempt or not exempt in the way that you're doing time tracking. So with exempt employees, you can track time to projects, but you can't track, but it is not a best practice to track when they arrive at work and when the specific time that they're departing from work. So it's also not a best practice to be deducting hour by hour from exempt employees' pay. With hourly employees, when you're doing time tracking, you want to have a system that is going to allow you to track all the 30-minute breaks and make sure that you are able to, if you're ever approached by the labor commissioner, show them, yes, our people take 30-minute breaks. This is how they take them. Or if your people are not taking 30-minute breaks, there is the possibility of paying them an additional amount for their missed break. So you want to be able to have a way of tracking that if that's what you're doing. Another thing to look into are your paychecks, like your pay stubs. There are like things that are required to be on those pay stubs. And when they're like class action lawsuits and things like that, pay stubs are some of the things that they just get pulled from all the employees, and then there are fines based on small issues on them. So looking at your paychecks, just making sure they're all up to date, they're accurate, and all of that. Next is PTO, sick pay, vacations, kind of like time away from work zone. So sick pay, it's been a few years now since sick pay was required by the state of California. So I hope that you have a sick pay practice in place. If you don't yet have one, it would be a good time to put one together. If you need any help figuring that out, just, reach out, happy to chat. There are a couple sort of standard ways to do it. One is to give people a lump sum of pay in the beginning of the year or at the start of their employment. And then another way is to have them accrue sick time based on the number of hours that they work. With PTO, just a reminder that in California, you cannot require people to use their PTO or lose it. You have to allow people to carry over their PTO into new years. However, you can set an accrual cap. So you can say, all right, you can only accrue, maybe they usually earn 10 days in a year. You can only accrue up to 15 days, or you can only have up to 10. So that's one way to do that. And then just look at how all those numbers are shaping up. Is your tracking system accurate? Some of the payroll and time tracking systems get weird, and you think that they're doing things that they're not. And so I just, recommend an audit to see how it's all working. Employee handbook is another one to look at. If you've looked at it recently, probably the only major change this year is the bereavement leave. So you just want to see if you have some kind of a clause in there that says that you abide by all the leaves of your state, regardless of what they are. And then just have a note that in the future to add the bereavement leave. Then another thing to look at that I recommend is employee onboarding. This is one of those kind of practices that it gets skipped. It's like, okay, cool. We signed everybody up for all the things. We have their paperwork, but like now what happens with someone? And so I encourage you to, take a little bit of time to think about how the experience of a new person to your company and what that looks like for them, and what are the significant events that happen for them along that way that are not just, this is how to do your job, but that are also about meeting all of the people and being welcomed into the fold. A reminder about retirement. So this is something that happened last year, which is a requirement that all employers provide retirement savings option to their employees. That not all, it was 5 or more employees, employers with 5 or more employees, but it is expanding to all employers starting in 2026. So just if you are an employer that has less than 5 employees, just know that you're going to have that same retirement benefit requirement starting in 2026. So there's a few years. There is a sponsored program called Cal Savers that is wonderful and will cover you. I think we already talked in a little bit of detail about leaves of absence. So just a reminder that there are lots of them in California, and to check them out. COVID is ongoing. It is still has requirements in the workplace. Some counties are different about what kinds of things they are requiring, and industries are really specific in their different COVID requirements. So just a reminder to be up to date on what is applicable to you. And then a last reminder is related to claims of discrimination. And I think employers often think about discrimination as, intentional discrimination, where like, I have decided not to hire someone because they are, of a certain background, or their skin is a certain color or something like that. But there is also a form of discrimination that is called adverse impact. And what that means is that you have a policy that you think is neutral, but in fact it is discriminatory because it selects for certain types of people. And so adverse impact is one of the more, I think, widespread and more insidious kinds of forms of discrimination, because it isn't like you're trying to discriminate. It is that there are unintentional discriminatory effects. And so that's something to think about in this next year. All right, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, go ahead and drop me an email at candace@fortressandflourish.com. Thanks for listening.